Let me know if this sounds like you. You've been looking at AWS for a while. You know you want to get started with your learning, but you're not really sure where to get started. You do know that there's a lot of resources and you're confused. Great news is that in today's video, I'm going to walk you through the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner, specifically in a series that I've created here called How Hard Is It? You'll see where Cloud Practitioner stacks up in the overall AWS certification hierarchy, and then you can make the decision if this is the right certification for you to start out with. I'm Greg Powell, creator of ThoughtfulTechy Cloud. I have over 20 years of experience in tech, and I've been working at AWS for over 7.5 years as a senior AWS solutions architect. I created ThoughtfulTechy Cloud to help people just like you figure out their AWS cloud and tech journey, so you can achieve your goals. Now, there are several AWS certifications you can take. The AWS Cloud Practitioner falls on that foundational level, and as the name suggests, this is an entry-level certification. Above that foundational level is the associate level. This is where you'll find the Solution Architect Associate, the Developer Associate, and the SysOps Administrator Associate. Above the associate level are the professional certifications. This is where you'll find the Solution Architect Professional and the DevOps Engineer Professional. Now, if you really want to drill into specialty areas, AWS also has an assortment of specialty certifications. Now, if you're trying to determine where you fall within that hierarchy, AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner is at the foundation. So this is an ideal certification, especially if you don't have any technical background whatsoever or any experience within AWS Cloud. AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner is a great place to start. I recommend the best place to start when you're trying to figure out what's the best certification for you to start with is to go to that certifications landing page. Now, I have the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner landing page pulled up here on my iPad, and I'll go in the description below and I'll put all the links that I'm referencing so you can go back and take a look at this after you've watched the whole video in its entirety. Now, on the AWS certification landing page for Cloud Practitioner, it's helpful to understand what is the duration of the exam. You get 90 minutes to complete this. Now, the number of questions on this is going to be 65. There's a couple of details I want to give you on those questions when I jump over to the exam guide that we'll talk about a little bit later here shortly. 65 questions. It's going to be a mix of multiple choice and multiple response. I'll explain what that means here in a minute. Now, exactly who is the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner for? On the page here from AWS, it says the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner validates foundational high-level understanding of AWS cloud services and terminology. Now, this is a good starting point on your AWS certification journey for any individuals with no prior IT or cloud experience, or switching to a cloud career, or from a line of business employees looking for foundational cloud literacy. If this sounds like you, then AWS Cloud Practitioner is going to be the perfect place for you to start. But what if you're still not convinced? Now it's time to jump over to the exam guide. Every AWS certification has what's called an exam guide. I'll link that in the description below. And this goes over all the details and expectations that are expected of you in preparation for this certification. What exactly does a Certified Cloud Practitioner validate? It's going to expect you to be able to explain the value of AWS Cloud, understand and explain the AWS Shared Responsibility Model. You have to understand security best practices, take a look at AWS Cloud cost, economics and billing practices, and describe core AWS services, including compute, network, database, and storage services. You'll also need to be able to identify common AWS services and their use cases. Not only is it helpful to understand what's going to be expected of you on the exam, it's also very helpful to determine what is outside the scope of this exam, so you don't have to worry about that in your preparation process. In the exam guide, these are job tasks that are out of scope for the target candidate, which means you don't need to know about these to prepare for your Certified Cloud Practitioner. You don't need to know how to code. You don't need to know in-depth cloud architecture design. There's not going to be anything related to troubleshooting. You're not going to need to know how to implement AWS services and solutions. and there's not going to be anything related to load and performance testing on the Certified Cloud Practitioner. Now, I told you earlier I was going to come back to those multiple choice and multiple response questions to kind of talk about that a little bit more. Now, multiple choice has 1 correct answer and 3 incorrect answers, typically referred to as distractors. The multiple response has 2 or more correct responses out of 5 or more response options. Now, for those multiple response, if it asks you for a pick 2, for example, you gotta pick 2 and also the right 2, or else you'll get that question wrong. Now, I also mentioned earlier that there's 65 questions on the exam. The interesting thing is there are 15 unscored questions that do not affect your score. It says here, AWS collects information about the performance of these unscored questions to evaluate these questions for future use as scored questions. Now, here's the trick. You are not going to know which of those 15 questions is unscored, so make sure that you answer all of them to the best of your ability. And in a worst case scenario, just guess, because there's no penalties for guessing. It's a lot better than leaving it blank, which means you're going to guarantee getting it wrong. Now, how is this exam scored? It's based on a scale score from a 100 to 1,000. And if you get a 100, you pretty much really did very horrible on it. And if you get 1,000, then guess what? You did pretty good. Now, the minimum passing score for this scaled score for the exam is 700. So if you get 700 points, it's thumbs up and you can go on to the next AWS cert. Now, the final thing I want to emphasize is what are called domains. Now, domains are the overarching areas of content that you're going to need to focus on. Now, the Certified Cloud Practitioner has 4 domains that are very important, and I'm also going to go over the weightings or the percentage of scored content that you can expect to be sprinkled in to your exam questions when you take that exam. Now, domain 1 is cloud concepts. This represents 24% of your Certified Cloud Practitioner exam. That's 1/4 of the exam. Domain 2 is security and compliance. This represents 30% of scored content, almost 1/3. Now, domain 3 is cloud technology and AWS services. That's 34% of scored content. And the 4th domain is billing, pricing, and support, representative of 12% of scored content on this exam. Now, I really want you to review the exam guide in its entirety. It's linked in the description below. Make sure you check that out, because under those domains are specific task statements, and it gets really in depth. So if you go back to the domain 1 real quick, where it's talking about cloud concepts, some of those task statements include defining the benefits of AWS Cloud, identifying design principles of AWS, task statement 1.3, understanding the benefits and strategies of migration to AWS Cloud, and then up under each of those task statements, which are up under the domains, there's really specific bulleted areas of things you need to know. So this is really going to help you out big time with your exam prep study process. And if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, I have a special treat for you. It's a free exam prep official question set for the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner. This is going to include 20 practice questions, and these questions are going to align very well to Certified Cloud Practitioner. Now, I would use these questions in 1 or 2 ways. Let's say you're trying to really determine if the Cloud Practitioner is the right certification for you to start out with. You can go ahead and take a look at these exam prep official questions, and you can go ahead and take them, and if you pass them, then it might be an indicator that, okay, maybe you're already good to go for your Cloud Practitioner, and you should go ahead and start off with another certification like the Solution Architect Associate. If you fail these questions, it's probably an indicator to say, you know what, okay, you didn't get around these questions, so yeah, definitely you need to prepare for the Certified Cloud Practitioner and start off on that foundational level. You can find the link to these practice questions in the description below. If you're curious what's next after the Certified Cloud Practitioner, take a look at this video right here where I go over how difficult is the Solution Architect Associate. And I'll see you in the next video.